Hey everybody, Neil here from Bology's Wireside Chats. I'm your host, Neil Terracciano. I'm here with Ron Singler from SimpliVity. Ron, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
What do you do before we get started on this, what do you do for SimpliVity?
I'm a principal solutions architect, so I work in pre-sales as well as post-sales side.
Okay, so do you get to do a lot of demonstrations?
I do it every day.
You do. You're a fellow propeller head, right? So you know a little bit about the nuts and bolts of this. Yep. Folks, the intention of this was for us to dive kind of past the slide deck and go straight into the user interface that SimpliVity provides for managing their solution. I've only seen bits and pieces of it, so Ron, it does look pretty complete. What's the process before we even go into check out the console on your side? What's the process for getting it installed? What are the requirements from the software perspective?
And so everything that we do is managed through VMware vCenter. And so for us to manage your environment, you just need our vSphere plugin right into the vSphere client, and you're all set up.
That's it?
That's it.
There's no other console?
No other console.
Okay, so we're going to be in vCenter with you.
Yep.
Okay, so folks, we're going to go ahead and jump in, take a look at some of the things that Ron wants to show us. Ron, if you want to just kind of run through sort of a demonstration, show some of the levers and buttons inside the user interface.
Sure. And
then, of course, I'll just ask you a few questions along the way.
Sounds great.
Go for it.
All right, so just to orient everybody to the environment, this is our demo environment up at corporate. We have a data center in London, logically represented. We've got a couple OmniCubes running there with some VMs. We also have a couple legacy or external hosts running as well that we can present our data stores over to in addition to the OmniCubes in that data center. We also have the San Francisco data center. It just has a single OmniCube running in there. So in our case here, London is our production site and San Francisco is our DR site. Now if I take a look at my London data center and take a look at all of the logical data that we have stored, we have it broken down into VM data, local backups, as well as remote backups. For VM data, we have 1.3 terabytes of VM data stored, 28.5 terabytes of local backups, and 2.7 terabytes of remote backups. Now, our core functionality is, right, we created a file system coupled with a piece of hardware that accelerates that file system, and we do inline deduplication compression optimization of all data across all tiers at the local site, as well as across all sites globally.
So you said deduplication. So what kind of impact in this? This is your sandbox environment. This is a SimpliVity owned environment.
Yep.
So what was the impact here? How much are we taking, and how much would it take in a traditional storage station?
So what we're looking at, out of 32.49 terabytes of data logically stored, our total efficiency rating is 66:1. So we have a dedupe ratio of 42.4:1. and a 1.6:1 compression ratio.
Okay, so 66:1. Yep. Help me wrap my head around that. Is this an all VDI scenario?
No, these are just standard server VMs. SQL, Exchange. We see customers in their normal environments averaging between 30 to 40:1 efficiency rating. We do have customers way over that. One customer in particular has to store their backups forever. Since we don't duplicate any data once it's stored in the system, when you run a backup with us, it's 0K. So they actually have, on 60 terabytes of effective capacity, they're storing 3.5 petabytes of data.
So 3,500 terabytes is squeezed to how much?
It's sitting on 60 terabytes.
So this one's really hard to kind of, I mean, all due respect, Ron, right? Yep. That's really hard to believe, right? Yeah. That we can get that level of deduplication.
That's why we do the demo.
Besides asking you how that happens, you have customers that would attest to the amount of deduplication. Absolutely. We can provide this information for them. Yep. Are there some data types, in your worst case, I mean, are there some things where they won't dedupe so much? Just to kind of level set or frame this a little bit, what's a bad case?
Yeah, if you're looking at video or a bunch of TIFF files, right, they're compressed, as part of their file format. Now, while we may not deduplicate that as greatly on the primary storage, since we do deduplicate all of our backups as well as our replication, as soon as you run your first backup of that data, it's 100% deduped for that backup. So
it's pointers essentially that are written.
Yeah, we're just making some changes in metadata and then guaranteeing those blocks will be there when you need to restore or recover.
So I'm essentially curtailing the rate or the trend of growth that is incurred from keeping a lot of snapshots.
All
right?
your backups, yep.
So would it be safe to say that over time my dedupe rate will increase?
Absolutely. Yeah, the more backups you do, the higher your dedupe rate is going to be.
So this is pretty amazing. What are the better scenarios that we've seen? We just touched on the worst.
Yeah, so VDI would probably be one of the best.
And what kind of dedupe ratio?
I mean, it's crazy, in the hundreds to one, depending on the scenario, right? It's just a bunch of copies of the same exact VM generally in a VDI type environment. So the dedupe is going to be pretty great.
Block level deduplication?
Yeah, so we're deduping at the 4K to 8K block level.
Is this happening, and I don't mean to steal the win from your sales, is this happening on the side, or is it happening somewhere? Are we spinning up a virtual machine that's doing this post-process?
Nope, so we run our virtual controller on each OmniCube. That is coupled.
Small VM?
Yep,
okay.
Small VM. It's coupled with our OmniStack accelerator, which is a PCIe card that we developed that sits inside of each OmniCube system. So as a write comes in, and it hits our card, we've persisted that write across multiple OmniCubes in the environment, so your data is protected. Once it hits 2 OmniCubes, we acknowledge that write back to the application. From there, we actually offload all of that dedupe compression optimization onto our card away from the Intel processor so that you're able to run more VMs. We sequentialize that I/O so it fits nice and neat on the back-end spindles and write it directly to the back-end spindles.
Okay, so there's a sequential layout piece that occurs post-process, which is kind of
that saves your
efficiency.
That saves you from having to run post-process defrag jobs, like if you're running a post-process deduplication engine.
So let's jump back to this real quick. Once again, we're looking at something that was 30. What is the total logical? 32 and a half?
Yep, 32.49
and we're down
terabytes.
To taking what? How much physical space in this situation?
So actually, we're only using 504 gig on our physical capacity.
Okay, all right, move on. Let's move on. That one's folks. We're gonna have to, we'll definitely have opportunities to prove this to you. We have it in our lab. I have an opportunity to fire it up. I know you've been all over us to do that. I think this might be a catalyst.
Yeah, I do want to point out, right, the important thing is while we've saved capacity, since we're doing that inline deduplication, we've actually removed all of that I/O that would have had to take place to the back-end spindle.
So is that a statement about deduplication in general, or is that a statement about your deduplication?
Well, it's about our dedupe, right? Okay. We're the only ones that are doing true inline dedupe compression and optimization of all data before it ever hits a spindle.
Okay, let's talk about that. Folks, we're gonna create another session to go on some of that. I think we could talk all day on that.
Sure.
So maybe we'll do a separate session on that.
Okay.
Let's jump into this. For those of us that wanted to see the UI, generally, you've showed us around, right? We've seen some of the federation. So the hierarchy is generally federation to data center to cluster to host machine, right?
Yep.
We've got an environment with several virtual machines. How many cubes are actually in this environment?
We've got 2 at production and 1 at DR.
So this is 3 cubes.
Yep.
Which model cube are you guys using?
These are the CM3000s.
Okay, so your bigger box, right, from a storage perspective.
Yep.
Presenting plenty of space, obviously very available, and then I'm hearing some synchronous type availability, right? If I'm waiting for a write acknowledgement in the cluster, then in the cluster, that's a 0 RTO, RPO scenario,
within a logical data center, right? You have full HA, so that if a node fails, everything fails over to a surviving node within that logical data center.
So in your case, we have an N+1, which is 1 box plus 1.
Correct.
But a customer may have 6
They
plus
may have
1.
10, they may have 100.
10 plus 4, depending on how they want to approach that, and they can survive multiple failures in the right scenario.
Correct.
Okay, great. So let's go to some of these other things that we wanted to touch on. One of them, you wanted to show me a little bit about cloning a machine.
Yeah, so just real quick, I dropped down into a VM. We're on our SimpliVity tab, again, our SimpliVity plugin. Here we can see that this VM has 1 terabyte of storage allocated to it. It's got 474 gig actually being used. Most importantly in this window is a list of all of our backups across the entire federation for this VM. So I can see a number of 400 gig backups. Again, this local backup
full
to
backups,
London,
right?
everything we do is a full backup, yeah, whether it's at the local site or the remote site. So this backup to the local site, London, it's a 483 gig VM that we had to back up, 0K in this case. When we do replication, we never duplicate data as long as it lives within the federation. So each OmniStack system understands all of the blocks that the other OmniStack systems own. So when we replicate, we only send unique blocks between the sites. Again, we don't duplicate it, right? So all the data remains deduplicated.
In the federation.
Throughout the federation.
And I keep interrupting you, so
Yep.
excuse me.
No worries.
So when you say the deduplication is in the federation, if I have a local operation occurring and I need to move that operation someplace else, or if I need to transmit that operation across the wire to the other location, this PCI card is, what's the name for the PCI card?
That's our OmniStack accelerator.
So your accelerator is already aware of the pointers and hashing that's associated with the deduplication across all of these cubes and all these clusters.
So that accelerator coupled with our file system, part of our virtual controller, they talk amongst themselves and share all of that information.
So there's a deduplication awareness across all the data centers in what you're calling a federation. Right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so in this case, we replicated this 483 gig full backup, and it only took 24 megabytes. This 483 gig full backup took 207K. Now this one we had a little more data change, so 474 gig, we sent 801 megabytes, right? So again, we're deduping at the 4K to 8K block level, so all of these blocks that we're transferring are extremely small and efficient as we're moving them around the federation.
So they're very friendly to high transaction rates.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah. So you mentioned clone, so we'll just right-click on this VM, and we'll do a SimpliVity clone. And again, this is using 474 gig in the environment, and we'll just click clone. Now this is a running VM, so a lot of customers, when they're using NFS type storage, the NFS VAI primitive only allows them to quickly replicate a VM that's powered off. In this case, it's powered on. We did a SimpliVity clone, and we've already cloned that 474 gig VM in 15 seconds.
Well, so you just actually completed the clone.
Yep.
How big was this? For half a T?
474 gig.
Okay, so how long would it take me to move the virtual machine then? That's pretty amazing. So how long is it going to take me to move a virtual machine from one data center?
So that's going to depend on what blocks already exist. Let's save that for later.
Okay.
And we'll actually move that VM. But if I drop down into this brand new VM, right, we'll click on the SimpliVity tab. Again, this VM has 1 terabyte of storage allocated to it. It's using 474 gig, but I don't have any backups for this VM yet. So now let's right-click on this VM, and we'll do a manual backup. Right? Now, let's be brave, and we'll go ahead and replicate this brand new 474 gig VM from London over to San Francisco. Now, keep in mind, if we talk about or think about legacy technology while this is taking place, if I create a brand new 474 gig VM, I have to replicate all 474 gigs of that VM.
Right.
There's no discussion that happens using legacy technology. No. Since the OmniCubes already understand what blocks already live at the other side, our backup will take, normally it takes less than 60 seconds. So it's running. Again, the analogy I like to use here is if you think of each VM as a Lego set, right? Each Lego set comes with an instruction booklet.
Did it just complete?
It's done, yeah. So we just simply send that instruction booklet for the Lego set across. It's compared to the blocks that already live there, and then we actually pull those blocks across. So if I refresh this, we'll actually see out of that brand new 474 gigs that's actually being used, we only had to send 17 megs across the pipe to make a full backup of that VM.
So this is on a Friday night. I decide I want to take down and evacuate everything on my box. Let's say it's only a handful of VMs. I can literally move these big honking VMs from one location to another location without calling the storage guy, calling the networking people, calling my ISP and maybe give me a little more juice. Yeah. It just happens, and I just used 17 megs. What kind of data was this? So tell me it was a desktop.
No, this is a server. I mean, it's got just a bunch of dumb files.
2012 R2 box with
It probably has a bunch of DVDs on it to fill up the space. But it doesn't matter, right? Because we're breaking down the blocks. They already exist simply because we have backups of the VM that we cloned it from.
And it's not that this other location necessarily was a scheduled DR target. You just said, hey, go over there.
It's going to check with all and see what blocks already exist over there. So if I have a bunch of Windows 2012 VMs at my production, a bunch at my DR site, but I've never replicated them before, all of a sudden I turn on replication, those blocks are going to be compared, and we're not going to replicate those Windows 2012 blocks.
And we just have to go in here and register the new machine, or is that just?
Yeah, so actually we're going to, let's do a local backup, right? And we'll tell you when you do a local backup, when we schedule these, your backup window goes away. Again, with a local backup, we don't have to compare those blocks between the sites. All we're doing is making a metadata change and then guaranteeing that those that full backup will be there when you need to restore it. So just while I was talking, that local backup already finished. That took 8 seconds for the local backup of 474 gig. And we'll refresh this, and we'll see that we didn't store any more data right within that site.
Because there really hasn't been any changes. And the interesting piece here is, unlike differentials or even incrementals that now seem really dumb, those will just send the change rate. Yep. In your case, it's not just what's changed. It's if I already have it, don't bother sending it.
Absolutely.
So that sounds ridiculously like common sense, and I don't understand why a solution like this hasn't bellied up any sooner. So
yeah, so it's an interesting story.
Yeah.
And our CEO has told it a couple times. All we've done is taken the dedupe algorithm that's been in backup appliances for a long time. We created a file system that's unique to us from scratch and moved the traditional deduplication algorithm that people are used to closer to the VM or application. Mm-hmm. Right? By doing that, we're then able to remove all of those redundant pieces and parts from the data center that have been put in and sold to fix point problems within the data center.
Right, because I'm thinking right now, for me to design something that just achieved this, which would be very difficult to start with one person to achieve this. I mean, this is a healthy exercise. And folks, you should go through this because this might sound a little bit familiar, or at least maybe something in between. So I've got, let's say, an EMC storage solution. I'm a fan of EMC, folks, don't get me wrong. Now I'm writing to data domain. And then I use some form of replication to replicate from data domain to another data domain that will then rehydrate onto my storage solution, and then now I'm in the same place where this was. It took me longer to actually state the process than what you showed me just happened with a virtual machine.
Just imagine if you had to whiteboard it.
And it's probably a little cheaper than a data domain box. Right?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah. So,
and you're gonna. I mean, the biggest thing is you're increasing operational efficiency in your data center.
Yeah, this is huge. You didn't make any phone calls to storage guys. You didn't call the network. Right. You didn't call all these other folks to do something. It's just pretty amazing. So, for those of you that are trying to keep a handle on operational expense or managing things, or maybe stop fixing the pipes and lights and start innovating, this is a really great opportunity to do that. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before happen that quickly without someone seriously orchestrating and setting up for success on this, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's really, really interesting. So a few more things you could show us?
So keep in mind, why backup if you can't restore? So I just brought up our restore window, and we can replace an existing virtual machine. We're going to default to create a new one. So this backup is stored in San Francisco. Let's restore it over to our London data center. Right, again, we can manage everything globally, so we just have to pick the data center that we want to do the restore to. We'll click restore. We'll get a pop-up saying, hey, you're restoring this across the wire. We don't care. Right? We know that no blocks have changed. So at this point, it's done. We're just waiting for vCenter to register that VM and make it available to the end user.
It's going to automatically do all the registration.
Yep. Process. Yeah. So here's our brand new Neil VM, and that restore took less than 20 seconds to restore. Again,
I don't think I can articulate a point in less than 20 seconds. That's that's pretty amazing. That's great stuff. So I know you probably touched on it. Can I clone or back up a machine with you it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's in production right now.
Yeah, so that's
so it'll
what.
quiesce and then take a application.
Yeah, so we actually let's dive into our backup policies. So we'll click up at the federation level.
Sure.
We can see how much data is being transferred between any site at any point in time. We've got a quick tabular view of our data centers up top, but most importantly are the backup policies. And for us, again, this is another piece that we wanted to simplify for operational purposes, right? When you create a backup policy, you give it a name, and then you begin assigning rules to that policy. And a rule is simply, how often do I want to back up, right? Minutes, hours, or days. How long do I want to keep that backup for? Again, minutes, hours, or days. And then where do I want to store that backup? Do I want to store that backup at my production site? I'll choose London. Do I want to set up replication over to San Francisco? For my DR site, I choose San Francisco. So I don't have to worry about the underlying infrastructure anymore, map volumes or LUNs or any of that stuff that you walked through earlier, right? I just pick the destination data center. Now for quiescing the file system and things like that, you just check this application consistent checkbox. We'll integrate with the VMware tools VSS implementation, quiesce the file system. We can set up some pre and post scripts to integrate with your applications if you want. And it's all fully supported.
So any VSS capable platform,
yep,
we're going to be able to use that shadow copy service.
Absolutely. Now, we said that your backup window goes away, but if you really want to set a start-stop time, we give you that option. Pick a day of the week or day of the month as well.
So, so this might sound crazy to folks that aren't familiar with SimpliVity. If I make the statement that I'd like to spin up a 1 terabyte virtual machine, I like the ability to back it up on a full backup every 5 minutes or 10 minutes.
Yep.
I'd like to be able to move that machine or copy it at any given manual time live, assuming it's VSS capable, right there on the spot. Create a backup, spin it up somewhere else. I can even transfer workloads quickly and easily without a whole failover process. Right?
Yeah. So we'll get out of the backup window, but if I just right-click on any powered-off VM, I have the option to do a SimpliVity move. So we'll just pick the data center that we want to move it to. In this case, San Francisco is our only other data center. And we'll click Move. It does have to be powered off, right? We can't unregister a powered-on VM from vCenter. So that is one limitation that VMware throws on us. But
so we'll see how long it'll be powered off for, right?
Yeah, so pretend we powered it off, click Move, it's moving it. So we're going to actually unregister that VM from vCenter in London in this case, move the unique blocks across, and then register that VM with vCenter in San Francisco in this case. So.
And how big was this virtual machine?
That's that 474 gig VM.
So this is another half a T that you're telling me that we decided to move the workload to San Francisco just 5 minutes ago, right? And so boom. Are we pretty much done here?
It's almost done, yeah. So it's done
90%.
registering it. It's waiting for vCenter. So that took, 90 seconds?
That's amazing.
Actually, not even that. No.
How many of you guys have had a CIO call or an IT director call and say, hey, I need this virtual machine somewhere else? Or at least the translation of what they asked for required something silly like moving a half a terabyte virtual machine across the world. That's pretty.
Actually
pretty
took less than
stuff.
60 seconds.
So we get to save a little money on the connectivity between our data centers as well, right? Assuming we're not using anything else on those links.
Right.
We could probably put a pretty. I mean, I'm looking at a meg, and this is the gross total moved, not the amount of not the bandwidth.
That's just stuff that's being moved between sites at that point.
Pretty easy to figure it out on that one, though, right? I mean, if we're at a meg and we did it in a minute and a half, what was that? Was that 10 megs? Is something close to that? Somebody will correct me, guys. Go ahead, just go ahead and bang it. Tell me how long it takes to right. Get your calculator out and correct me on that one. That's some really amazing stuff. So. Things like creating a new data store.
Yeah, so that's done at the data center level. We can just right-click down here in our data stores window. We'll click Create Data Store. Again, this gets in that global management piece, right? We can pick the data center we want to create it in. We give it a name. We'll make the Neil Data Store. We assign a backup policy to it, and then we give it a size. We'll make this one 300 terabytes and click Create. So at this point, we go off on the back end. We create the data store on the OmniCubes. unify the namespace across the OmniCubes, set the export permissions. Then we're going to automatically mount this data store on the OmniCubes within that data center so that when we're done, you just simply migrate VMs over to us or create new VMs on it, and you're ready to rock and roll.
So no LUNs or disk groups or RAID 1 through 60 or...
It's all taken care of for you. Customers don't want to have to worry about that anymore. They just want stuff that works.
Like,
right?
What's my LUN ID? That doesn't matter anymore.
What's your data store name? That's all we care about.
That's pretty amazing.
Now, one piece that we always like to show is, we don't want to be a barrier to entry for our customers, so we can also present our data stores to their external hosts, so their existing ESX hosts. So we just pick the data store that we want to share with them.
Okay.
Click Manage Host, and we're going to bring up a window that has the hosts that we're able to present this data store to. Check the box. We'll click OK. And we'll let it know that, yep, they're configured correctly. And at this point, we're going to go off, set the export permissions since the data store is already created, automatically mount this data store on those external or legacy hosts, and they storage vMotion over to our data stores, and they get all of our features and functionality, even though they're using CPU and memory from those, what we call compute nodes.
So big point here, folks, and this is really important. This is one of the things that I typically as a solutions architect have a problem with when it comes to your typical converged solution, is that it usually closes the door to some of the incremental scale that we might need in an environment. So one of the biggest arguments that we've all heard, and I used to be one of them, was that I can't really tailor a converged solution. I either end up with a little bit too much compute or a lot too much compute or too much storage because the other piece was where I needed to go. And since I'm getting storage with every core of processing power, it creates sort of a problem that I can only answer with in really big environments where one box doesn't matter. But when I got a customer that's defining N as possibly 1 or 2 boxes, I can run into some problems. Maybe they don't need all this storage, especially with the dedupe rate. So this becomes a very expensive compute platform. But folks, have absolutely no fear. We apparently can now attach host machines, right?
Absolutely.
To a particular data store. Are there some limitations with that we need to take into consideration?
No, it's just
present the data
any other ESX
store, connect it. So I can bring it into a legacy scenario where maybe I didn't fully need it, but still connect this and start to bring some machines in here. I have a feeling they won't leave that host cluster.
Maybe a common scenario is customer just bought some servers last year. But their storage array is up for refresh, right? Not everybody is on the same cycle for all of their equipment, right? So we can come in right alongside that storage platform, present our data stores over to their existing hosts. They storage vMotion off of their old storage onto us, and that's it, right? They still have their investment in their old servers. They have some additional compute to expand the environment, plus they've replaced their legacy storage from the environment.
Wow, so really, really strong use case for that one little project where I needed to I was pushing the limits of something I already had, or folks are pushing us to sort of separate something. VDI is usually a case where we hear a lot, right, where there's a VDI opportunity. Given the deduplication, I can imagine massive numbers of desktops being able to be supported in relatively fractional amount of rack space in comparison to my my monolithic storage solution plus my let's say blade chassis or even some of my 1U pizza boxes. In this case, we end up swallowing a lot of that stuff.
One of the cool things about doing VDI on our platform is because we're deduplicating all of that data in line, there's really no need to use link clones anymore, and now the customers can offer backup services to their VDI customers, persistent desktops, and now even disaster recovery for those desktop services.
So one of the biggest complaints about persistent desktops, one of them, I understand there's more of them, is that it's just a lot of storage space.
Sure.
In your case,
it's not.
Not really. We all pretty much have the same operating system, and even some of the documents or some of the files that we have in there are going to have 4K that are going to be similar.
Absolutely.
That's really exciting. How can a customer learn about what effect SimpliVity can have in their environment?
The best way is to get in touch with their Vology folks. Vology is one of our top partners, and they're our go-to in the Tampa market. So, just contact your friendly Vology folks.
So, folks, there are that's something that we're definitely very willing to help out, evaluate, number one, and most importantly, whether converged solution is the right solution for you. And then secondly, what converged solution is going to be your best fit. And I can tell you, though, that I'm very hard-pressed to get myself away from the mousetrap that you guys have. Yeah. Stay tuned, because we're gonna do a deep dive if you're willing to stick around for a few minutes. We'll do another cut, and we'll do a little bit of a deep dive into this piece that's making all this automagical stuff happen on your control platform. Still no CLI to get into, just a tab in vCenter.
Yep.
And all of a sudden,
now we do have CLI if a customer wants to write scripts, but again, that's available globally as well.
Okay. So fully integrated with all the vRealize operations and all that stuff, right? That's coming out.
All that sits above us.
Can I provide private and public cloud with this platform? Or cloud with this platform?
Yeah, we actually
works well in a hybrid scenario.
Won Best Cloud at VMworld 2014 over in Europe.
Best Cloud at VMware.
VMworld 2014.
2014. That's a pretty big deal. Well, that's pretty cool stuff, folks. Make sure you reach out to your account manager at Vology if you're interested in getting some more information. We've created this video to sort of give you an opportunity to do a little further evaluation of what the user interface is, and without getting involved into a sales process. We want to make this as approachable a technology as possible for you guys to evaluate. We're certainly very happy to give you a personal demonstration on the product, whether it would be someone like myself or someone that's going to be even better at it, like Ron, to show you some of the ins and outs of the technology, and maybe even go over some use cases and some reference architectures, even some reference architectures that we've done. I know that there's going to be some really exciting stuff on the side of Vology as far as how we might leverage SimpliVity, so I'm very excited to see how that turns out. We are definitely believers in the solution. And I really hope that you guys keep this mousetrap, man, because it's definitely something that helps you guys stick out way beyond the rest of them.
Awesome.
So, Ron, thanks so much for putting some time aside to jump into this thing and jump into the UI for us. And I really appreciate if you could stick around. We'll go over some of the deeper dive stuff in a few minutes on how that. And what is that called? OmniStack?
OmniStack.
Data management layer or OmniStack?
Data virtualization platform.
Data virtualization platform. Okay, folks, we'll Google that. Until then, I'll see you folks on the wire side. Impact, and this is your sandbox environment. This is SimpliVity owned environment.
Yep. So
what was the impact here? How much are we taking, and how much would it take in a traditional storage station?
So what we're looking at, out of 32.49 terabytes of data logically stored, our total efficiency rating is 66 to 1. So we have a dedupe ratio of 42.4 to 1. And a 1.6 to 1 compression ratio.
Okay, so 66 to 1.
Yep.
Help me wrap my head around that. Is this an all VDI scenario?
No, these are just standard server VMs. SQL, Exchange. We see customers in their normal environments averaging between 30 to 40 to 1 efficiency rating. We do have customers way over that. One customer in particular has to store their backups forever. It's a data center. We also have the San Francisco data center. It just has a single OmniCube running in there. So in our case here, London is our production site, and San Francisco is our DR site. Now, if I take a look at my London data center and take a look at all of the logical data that we have stored, we have it broken down into VM data, local backups, as well as remote backups. For VM data, we have 1.3 terabytes of VM data stored, 28.5 terabytes of local backups, and 2.7 terabytes of remote backups. Now, our core functionality is, we created a file system coupled with a piece of hardware that accelerates that file system, and we do inline deduplication compression optimization of all data across all tiers at the local site, as well as across all sites globally.
So you said deduplication, so what kind of... Hey everybody, Neil here from Vology's Wireside Chats. I'm your host, Neil Terracciano. I'm here with Ron Singler from SimpliVity. Ron, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
Well, what do you do for before we get started on this, what do you do for SimpliVity?
I'm a principal solutions architect, so I work in pre-sales as well as post-sales side.
Okay, so do you get to do a lot of demonstrations?
I do it every day.
You do. So you're a fellow propeller head, right? So you know a little bit about the nuts and bolts of this. Folks, the intention of this was for us to dive kind of past the slide deck and go straight into the user interface. that SimpliVity provides for managing their solution. I've only seen bits and pieces of it, so Ron, it does look pretty complete. What's the process before we even go into check out the console on your side? What's the process for getting it installed? What are the requirements from the software perspective?
Yeah, so everything that we do is managed through VMware. Since we don't duplicate any data once it's stored in the system, when you run a backup with us, it's 0K. So they actually have, on 60 terabytes of effective capacity, they're storing 3.5 petabytes of data.
So 3,500 terabytes is squeezed to how much?
It's sitting on 60 terabytes.
So this one's really hard to kind of, I mean, all due respect, Ron, right?
Yep.
That's really hard to believe, right?
Yeah.
That we can get that level of deduplication.
That's why we do the demo.
Besides asking you how that happens, you have customers that would attest to the amount of deduplication.
Absolutely.
We can provide this information for them.
Yep.
Are there some data types, in your worst case, I mean, are there some things where they won't dedupe so much? Just to kind of level set or frame this a little bit, what's a bad case?
Our vCenter. And so for us to manage your environment, you just need our vSphere plugin right into the vSphere client, and you're all set up.
That's it?
That's it.
There's no other console?
No other console.
Okay, so we're going to be in vCenter with you.
Yep.
Okay, so folks, we're going to go ahead and jump in, take a look at some of the things that Ron wants to show us. Ron, if you want to just kind of run through sort of a demonstration, show us some of the levers and buttons inside the user interface.
Sure.
And then, of course, I'll just ask you a few questions along the way.
Sounds great.
Go for it.
All right, so just to orient everybody to the environment, this is our demo environment up at corporate. We have a data center in London, logically represented. We've got a couple OmniCubes running there with some VMs. We also have a couple legacy or external hosts running as well that we can present our data stores over to, in addition to the OmniCubes in that